Hello and welcome back to the Eco Kids podcast. So if you've just found me, my name is Emily and I'm an early childhood teacher from New Zealand. Over the years, I've worked in just about every part of the early childhood education sector. So from private centres and kindergartens to home-based education, nannying, and I now work as a visiting teacher supporting home-based educators. And although I'm based in New Zealand, I know we do have listeners from Australia and the United States as well as other parts of the world as well. I often talk about the New Zealand system specifically because that's where my experience comes from. But today's conversation is really about principles that will apply anywhere in the world. I will say that every country has different regulations, but children everywhere all need the same things. They all need safe relationships, responsive adults, and environments where they can genuinely thrive. So today I wanted to answer a question I hear all the time. What actually is home-based childcare? Because I think whenever parents think and talk about early childhood education, the conversation nearly always goes straight to centres, whether that's early childhood centres or some people call it daycare centres in other parts of the world. But there are actually lots of different options available, and home-based education is an option that many families either don't know exists or they don't really understand what it is. So let's talk about it. When people hear home-based childcare, they often imagine someone babysitting children in their home. And that's actually not what home-based education is. In New Zealand, home-based educators are registered through licensed services and are supported by qualified visiting teachers. So that is the job that I do. I go around and I support our amazing educators to do what they do. And just like in a centre-based early childhood, there are regulations around ratios, safety, professional learning, and curriculum. So all the safety and regulations are pretty much exactly the same as what you would see in a centre. And in my experience, the ministry actually comes down harder on home-based. The company I work for is actually a new company, and we just went through our full licensing a few months ago, and I really noticed how harsh they were on home-based education. I thought it was a little bit funny because I have been to hundreds and hundreds of centres who definitely do not meet all the regulations or even follow the curriculum, if I'm honest. Yet I did find that they were coming down really hard on home-based. But that is a whole other conversation. I know in Australia they also have home-based educations, but in the USA you might hear terms like family childcare or a licensed home daycare. The systems are slightly different, but the idea is pretty similar. So basically it just means small groups of children learning in a home environment. So what is the difference between centre-based early childhood and home-based? I think one of the biggest differences is size. So instead of 20, 30, or even up to 50 children in one room, in New Zealand, home-based education, the maximum amount of children you can have is 4. So you get a lot more one-on-one attention, and it actually just changes the whole environment completely. One of the really big advantages of home-based education is relationships. And if you listen to my first episode, you'll know that I talked about relationships a lot because it is literally the foundation of early childhood. So in these smaller home-based environments, educators have more opportunities to really get to know a child one-on-one, and they have more time and space to notice the little things. I also think there's a lot more flexibility in terms of routines, sleeping, eating, all those kinds of things, because you're not just simply trying to crowd control, which is what I see in a lot of centres. This actually allows children to develop deeper relationships and sort of coming into the feel and the pace of the day. Home-based education often feels a lot calmer than centres Don't get me wrong, there are definitely times where things can be crazy, because I think when you're working with children, it's not always calm and controlled all the time, no matter how hard we try. But in saying that it's calmer, it doesn't mean that children are sitting quietly all day. What I actually mean is the pace of the day is a lot slower and a lot more flexible. So children are a lot less rushed. They have opportunities to go out into the community on different adventures. They go to the park. One of our home-based educators, she's very close to one of our many Auckland volcanoes, and the children walk there regularly. They have a lot of nature play. They do not need any toys. They simply use the environment around them to build and create, which is really awesome. I do feel that there's a lot more opportunity for messy and sensory play because you've got a lesser amount of children. I think that children are able to actually go deeper into their learning. So for example, in a centre, they might be really engaged in some construction play that they're doing, but because they're moving on to the next part of the day, or there's other children that want to use those resources, or they need to tidy up, they're not able to actually expand on it because they're being rushed to, pack things away. Whereas in home-based, there is a lot more flexibility. They're actually able to come back and revisit some of these experiences. It's a lot easier to change the flexibility of the day when you have 4 children as opposed to between 20 and 50 children. Another bonus for home-based education is flexibility. I think that by now we know that not all children learn in the same way. Some might thrive in really busy social environments, while others might become really overwhelmed by a lot of noise, movement, and just the constant stimulation. It's not to say that neither one is better. They're just very different. I've worked with children who loved big centres because they thrived on the energy, but I've also seen many, many children in centres who are not suited for the space, and I think once they have the opportunity to move into a smaller environment, they would blossom. And I don't think it's a conversation about the best type of education. It's more about choosing the environment that best suits your child and your family. So what should parents actually look for? So whether you're visiting centre, home-based, or any other early childhood setting, I'd actually ask the same questions. So some of the questions might look like, how does the educator or how do the teachers talk to children? Do the children seem relaxed? Are the relationships warm? Is learning child-led? How are emotions supported? And do children look like they belong? So these types of questions are far more important than whether learning happens in a centre's building or somebody's home. Doesn't matter where it is, these questions are important for any context. I would also like to bust some common myths that I hear. One of the biggest things I hear is children won't socialise, or they will not learn to socialise. This is completely wrong. I think in a home-based environment, having that small group actually provides wonderful opportunities to develop friendships. And the beauty of home-based is they are actually able to go out into the local community because of the small group size. So they're able to go out to playgroups, excursions, and they're actually getting a lot more learning in that way, being out in their local community than being stuck in a centre all day. There's a lot of brain science that goes into all of this, but children don't need to socialise in the way that we think they do. Especially very young children, they do not need to socialise. They need to have a consistent, secure attachment. So whether that's the parent or an educator, they need to have the one secure attachment, and is way more important, and that sets the foundations up for their future relationships. So it's definitely not about going and making a ton of friends. One of the other things I hear a lot is that children won't be school ready or children will not be ready for school. I actually would like to do a whole episode about school readiness. There are a lot of different opinions, a lot of different information out there. But at the end of the day, school readiness isn't about sitting down, doing worksheets. It's not about reading and writing. None of those things are actually important. The most important things are children having confidence, being able to communicate, being curious and problem solving, the relationships they create around them, and emotional regulation. I think that's a really big one that we often miss. And these skills don't just have to be made in one type of environment. There's lots of different ways that these skills can come about. I also think another myth that we have about home-based education is it's a lot less professional because not all educators are qualified. So this actually is definitely not true at all. In New Zealand, educators work alongside their visiting teachers who are fully registered teachers. And their job is to support them. But educators follow Te Wharaki, which is our national early childhood curriculum. They also complete professional learning, professional growth cycles, and they're meeting all the licensing requirements. So it might not be as detailed as a qualified teacher, but they have to go through all the same professional growth cycles and meet all the requirements just the same as a qualified teacher. So this episode is a little bit shorter than my previous one, but I don't want it to be too long-winded because I'm mindful I can talk all day. I will do a blog post about this and I'll also make up a cheat sheet of questions. So please keep an eye on the website www.ecokidscollective.com. I have just changed the name of my business. But I hope this episode has helped explain a little bit more about what home-based education actually is. And if you are currently looking for early childhood education options, I really encourage you to keep an open mind. Visit lots of different places, ask questions, observe the relationships, and as always, trust your gut. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment or reach out via social media. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I'd really appreciate it if you followed the podcast and left a review. It just helps me help more families discover these conversations. But until next time, take care, go well, and I'll see you in the next episode.